In a quiet town in the United States lived a kind-hearted woman named Sarah. She wasn't famous or wealthy, but everyone in her neighborhood knew her for one thing: her warm smile. No matter what she was going through, she always greeted people with kindness. Sarah had one son, Ethan. After her husband passed away, Ethan became the center of her world. Every morning she packed his lunch before school, and every evening she waited by the front window, excited to hear the sound of his footsteps coming home. His dreams became her dreams, and his happiness became the purpose of her life. Years passed. Ethan graduated from college and accepted a great job in another state. At first, he called his mom every evening. They laughed together, shared stories, and stayed close despite the distance. But life has a way of changing routines. The daily calls turned into weekly conversations, then monthly check-ins, and eventually, long periods of silence. Even so, Sarah never stopped believing her son would always find time for her. On her bedside table sat an old framed photo of Ethan as a little boy. Every night before going to sleep, she looked at that picture and whispered, "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." One afternoon, the neighbors noticed something strange. Someone casually asked, "When is Ethan coming to visit?" Sarah looked confused. "Ethan?" she replied softly. "Who's Ethan?" The neighbors thought she must be joking. She wasn't. A few days later, Ethan rushed home after hearing about his mother's condition. He walked through the front door with tears in his eyes. "Mom, it's me. I'm home." Sarah looked directly at him. Her eyes searched his face, but there was no recognition. "I'm sorry," she said politely. "Do I know you?" In that moment, Ethan felt his heart sink. After several medical examinations, the doctor delivered unexpected news. "Your mother's memory isn't completely gone," he explained. "She still remembers her childhood, her home, old friends, and many important moments from her life. But somehow, her mind has disconnected itself from one specific person." The doctor paused. "That person is you." The room fell silent. Then the doctor gently asked Ethan a question that changed everything. "Tell me honestly, how often have you truly been there for your mother during the past few years?" Suddenly, memories flooded Ethan's mind. The unanswered phone calls, the messages he promised to reply to later, the birthdays he missed because he was too busy, the visit he kept postponing, and the day his mother quietly said, "If you have some free time, I'd really love to see you." He never went. The doctor spoke softly. Sometimes the human brain protects itself from overwhelming emotional pain in unexpected ways. Instead of holding on to the person who caused the deepest hurt, it slowly pushes that memory into the background. Tears rolled down Ethan's face. For the first time, he realized something painful. Maybe he hadn't only drifted away from his mother. Maybe he had slowly become a stranger to the person who loved him the most. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The doctor's words echoed through his mind again and again. The brain sometimes hides the memories that carry the deepest emotional pain. He sat alone in his childhood bedroom, staring at old family photos. For years he had believed that success meant working harder, earning more, and building a better future. But somewhere along the way, he had forgotten the person who had sacrificed everything to give him that future. The next morning, before leaving the hospital, the doctor stopped him. "Ethan," he said, "your mother's condition teaches us something far bigger than memory." Ethan looked up. The doctor continued, Every human being carries invisible stories inside their mind. Those stories quietly shape every decision they make. He pulled out a notebook and drew 2 small circles. In one circle, he said, write every painful experience you've had. Ethan began thinking. Failing an important exam. Being rejected from his dream internship. Losing friendships. Feeling like he wasn't good enough. The doctor nodded. Now tell me, whenever you face a new challenge today, what voice do you hear inside your head? Without thinking, Ethan answered, what if I fail again? The doctor smiled gently. Exactly. That voice isn't your future speaking. It's your past. For a moment, the room became completely silent. The doctor leaned forward. Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they're listening to an old version of themselves. Those words stayed with Ethan long after he left. Driving back home, he realized something. Every time he wanted to take a bigger step in life, the same thoughts appeared. You're not ready. Someone else can do it better. Don't embarrass yourself. He had heard those sentences so many times that they sounded like facts. But were they? Or were they simply old memories disguised as truth? That evening, Ethan opened a journal for the first time in years. Across the top of the page, he wrote one question. What story have I been telling myself? The answer surprised him. I always mess things up. I'm never lucky. I'm not confident. I'll probably fail. He stared at those sentences for several minutes. Then he realized something powerful. None of them were facts. They were just conclusions he had created from painful moments years ago. And if a story was created, maybe it could also be rewritten. Over the next few days, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about one question. If the mind can hold on to painful stories for years, can it also learn a better one? At his next appointment, he asked the doctor exactly that. The doctor smiled. It already does. He picked up a whiteboard marker and drew a simple line. Think about your memories, he said. Most people believe they're like photographs stored in a box, unchanged forever. But neuroscience tells us something different. Every time you remember an event, your brain briefly opens that memory. During that moment, your emotions can strengthen it or reshape the meaning attached to it. Ethan listened carefully. So, you're saying the past doesn't change? The facts don't, the doctor replied. But the meaning you give those facts can. That sentence stayed with Ethan. Later that night, he remembered one of the most embarrassing moments of his life. Years earlier, he had been asked to give a presentation at work. Halfway through, he froze. His mind went blank. He stumbled over his words, and although only a few people noticed, he walked away believing he was terrible at public speaking. For years, every opportunity to speak in front of others filled him with anxiety. The doctor had given him an exercise. Close your eyes, he had said. Replay the memory from beginning to end. But don't stop where you failed. So what do I do? Ethan had asked. Keep the story going. That night, Ethan tried it. In his imagination, he saw himself take a slow, deep breath. Instead of giving up, he smiled. He gathered his thoughts and continued speaking with confidence. The audience listened. People nodded. When he finished, they applauded. His heart began to race. Not from fear this time, but from hope. The next morning, the embarrassing memory didn't disappear, but it didn't feel as heavy anymore. The doctor later explained why. Your brain responds strongly to repeated emotional experiences. When you consistently replace fear with confidence in your imagination, you're teaching your mind a new emotional pattern. That's why successful athletes mentally rehearse before competitions. They aren't pretending. They're preparing their brain. Ethan finally understood. His greatest obstacle wasn't the mistake he had made years ago. It was the story he had repeated ever since. And for the first time, he realized he had the power to write a different ending. Although Ethan had begun changing the way he thought, one question still bothered him. If changing my mindset is so important, he asked the doctor one afternoon, why doesn't repeating positive affirmations work for me? The doctor smiled. Because your brain doesn't believe words that your emotions reject. He handed Ethan an empty glass. If I pour an entire gallon of water into this glass at once, what happens? It overflows, Ethan answered. Exactly. The mind works the same way. Most people try to force huge beliefs into a brain that's still full of doubt. He continued, if you wake up tomorrow, look in the mirror, and say, I'm the most successful person in the world, your brain will immediately argue back. No, you're not. Look at your past. Look at your mistakes. The conflict begins because your brain has years of evidence supporting the opposite belief. Ethan nodded. So how do I change that? Don't chase huge emotions. Collect small ones. The doctor explained that the brain changes through repeated emotional experiences, not dramatic speeches. Spend just a few seconds each day fully appreciating something real. A warm cup of coffee. The sunlight coming through your window. A quiet walk. A genuine smile. A deep breath. Those tiny moments seem insignificant, but they teach your brain that life isn't only made of stress and fear. The next morning, Ethan decided to try it. Instead of grabbing his phone the moment he woke up, he walked onto the back porch with a cup of coffee. The morning air was cool. Birds were singing. The neighborhood was still peaceful. For nearly 20 seconds, he did absolutely nothing. He simply noticed the warmth of the mug in his hands, the smell of fresh coffee, the gentle breeze against his face. For the first time in months, his mind felt quiet. Nothing extraordinary had happened. His problems hadn't disappeared. His responsibilities were still waiting. But something inside him had shifted. Later that day, he realized he wasn't reacting to stress as quickly as before. He felt calmer, more focused, more present. That evening, the doctor explained why. Whatever you repeatedly focus on becomes easier for your brain to notice. If you spend every day searching for danger, your mind becomes an expert at finding problems. But if you regularly notice moments of gratitude, peace, and possibility, your brain slowly begins searching for those instead. Ethan smiled. Real change wasn't arriving through one life-changing event. It was growing quietly, one peaceful moment at a time. Over the following weeks, Ethan noticed something surprising. His life hadn't changed dramatically. He still had deadlines. He still had bills to pay. His mother still struggled with her memory. Yet, somehow, he felt different. One afternoon, while taking a walk through the neighborhood, he passed two people sitting on separate park benches. The first man stared at the ground with frustration written across his face. The economy is terrible, he complained on the phone. Nothing ever goes right. A few steps away, another man sat quietly reading a book. Every few minutes, he smiled as children played nearby. Both men were in the same park, under the same sky, breathing the same fresh air. Yet they seemed to be living in completely different worlds. That evening, Ethan mentioned this to the doctor. The doctor nodded. Because they are. Seeing Ethan's confused expression, he continued. Your eyes don't decide what matters. Your brain does. He picked up a flashlight from his desk. If I shine this light into a dark room, you'll only notice whatever the beam touches. Our attention works exactly the same way. The brain is constantly filtering millions of pieces of information every second. It keeps only what it believes is important. If your mind expects disappointment, it will find disappointment. If it expects opportunities, it will begin noticing opportunities that were always there. Ethan suddenly remembered something. Years ago, before buying his first blue SUV, he had barely noticed that model on the road. But after deciding to purchase one, it seemed like everyone owned the exact same vehicle. The doctor laughed. The cars didn't suddenly appear. Your attention changed. He paused before adding, the same thing happens with happiness. If you constantly search for what's missing, your brain becomes an expert at finding problems. But if you intentionally notice progress, even tiny progress, your mind slowly builds a different picture of reality. That night, Ethan started a simple habit. Before going to bed, he wrote down 3 small things that had gone well during the day. Some days they seemed almost too small to matter. I finished an important task. Mom smiled during breakfast. I took a walk without checking my phone. Nothing extraordinary. But after several weeks, something incredible happened. He no longer had to search for positive moments. His mind began noticing them automatically. For years, fear had trained his attention. Now gratitude was quietly teaching it something new. And for the first time in a long while, the future didn't seem nearly as frightening as it once had. A few days later, Ethan asked the doctor another question. If changing the way I think is important, what's the first real step toward changing my life? The doctor smiled. Most people wait until they feel confident before they act. He paused. But confidence usually comes after the first step, not before it. The words stayed with Ethan. On his drive home, he realized how many dreams he had abandoned simply because they felt too big. He wanted to start a business. He wanted to buy a beautiful home for his mother. He wanted financial freedom. But every dream seemed overwhelming. Whenever he imagined the finish line, his mind immediately asked, how are you going to do all that? And because he didn't have every answer, he did nothing. The following weekend, Ethan took his mother shopping. As they walked through a home decor store, Sarah slowly admired the furniture, paintings, and soft lighting. Everything looked beautiful. Everything looked expensive. Ethan quietly whispered, maybe one day. Just then, Sarah picked up a simple wooden candle holder from a display shelf. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't expensive. She smiled and handed it to Ethan. I like this one. Ethan chuckled. But Mom, we don't even have a place for it. She looked at him with a peaceful smile. Not yet. 3 simple words. Not yet. For some reason, those words stayed with him. He bought the candle holder and placed it on a shelf in his apartment. Every morning before leaving for work, he saw it. It reminded him of the home he wanted to build someday. The house didn't exist, but the dream suddenly felt real. At his next appointment, Ethan told the doctor about it. The doctor smiled knowingly. That's called creating evidence. He explained, your brain doesn't only respond to goals, it responds to proof. When your dream has no evidence, it feels impossible. But the moment you create even one tiny symbol of that future, your brain begins believing the journey has already started. He gave Ethan several examples. If you dream of becoming a writer, buy a notebook. If you want to run a marathon, start with a pair of running shoes. If you want to launch a business, create the business name. Print the first business card. Open the email account. Take one small action. None of those actions guarantee success, but they send a powerful message to your mind. I'm no longer just dreaming. I'm becoming the person who can achieve it. That evening, Ethan looked once more at the small wooden candle holder. A few weeks earlier, it had been nothing more than a decoration. Now it had become a daily reminder that every extraordinary life begins with one ordinary step. He finally understood something most people never realize. Massive success isn't built in a single leap. It's built through hundreds of tiny decisions that quietly shape who you become. And sometimes, the smallest action is the one that changes everything. A few months passed. Life was improving, but it still wasn't perfect. Sarah's memory came and went. Some days she recognized familiar places. Other days, she seemed lost in thoughts no one else could understand. At work, Ethan was facing new pressure. The company had started cutting costs. Rumors about layoffs spread through the office every day. People whispered in hallways. Some updated their resumes. Others spent hours reading bad news online. Soon, Ethan found himself doing the same thing. Every night before bed, he checked his bank account. He calculated bills. He read articles predicting another recession. He watched videos filled with fear and uncertainty. By the time he put his phone down, his heart was racing. His body was exhausted, yet he couldn't sleep. The next day he made careless mistakes at work. His patience disappeared. Even the smallest problem felt overwhelming. When the doctor visited Sarah later that week, he immediately noticed the change in Ethan. "You look tired," he said. "I barely sleep anymore," Ethan admitted. The doctor asked him a simple question. "What is the last thing your mind sees before you fall asleep?" Ethan thought for a moment. "My phone. My bills. The news. My worries." The doctor nodded. "Then that's exactly what your brain works on all night." Seeing Ethan's puzzled expression, he continued. "Your brain treats the final thoughts before sleep like unfinished instructions. If you fall asleep carrying fear, your mind spends the night strengthening fear. But if you fall asleep with hope, it begins searching for solutions instead." That idea changed everything. The doctor wasn't telling him to ignore reality. Bills still had to be paid. Problems still needed solutions. But there was a better time to face them. "Handle your responsibilities during the day," the doctor explained. "Make your plans. Create your budget. Solve what you can. But don't invite your worries into bed with you." That evening, Ethan made one small decision. At 9 p.m., his phone automatically switched into Do Not Disturb mode. No emails, no financial apps, no breaking news, no endless scrolling. Instead, he sat on the back porch with Sarah. The evening breeze was cool. A soft orange sunset painted the sky. Neither of them spoke very much. They simply shared a quiet moment together. Before going to sleep, Ethan wrote one sentence in his journal. "Today's problems deserve tomorrow's effort, not tonight's peace." He closed the notebook, took a deep breath, and for the first time in weeks, he fell asleep within minutes. The next morning, nothing outside had changed. The bills were still there. Work was still demanding. The uncertainty hadn't disappeared, but something inside him had. His mind felt clearer. His thoughts were calmer. And instead of waking up asking, "What if everything goes wrong?" he found himself asking, "What's the best thing I can do today?" Sometimes the biggest breakthrough doesn't come from solving every problem. Sometimes it begins by protecting the thoughts you carry into sleep. The new evening routine slowly became a habit. Instead of ending each day with anxiety, Ethan ended it with reflection. Instead of scrolling through endless headlines, he spent a few minutes writing in his journal. Every night, he answered the same 3 questions. What went well today? What did I learn today? What's one small step I can take tomorrow? At first, the answers seemed ordinary. I completed an important project. Mom laughed at an old movie. I stayed calm during a stressful meeting. But week after week, something unexpected happened. He stopped measuring his life only by big achievements. He began noticing quiet progress. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan and Sarah visited a nearby botanical garden. As they walked along the peaceful paths, Sarah suddenly stopped beside a young oak tree. It was only a few feet tall. She gently touched one of its leaves. "It's amazing," she whispered. "What is?" Ethan asked. "This tree. It looks so small, but one day it'll be strong enough to survive storms." Ethan smiled. The doctor had often said something similar. Strong people aren't built during easy seasons. They're built through small acts of consistency. Later that evening, Ethan shared the conversation with the doctor. The doctor nodded. Most people admire confidence, but confidence is only the result. The real secret is consistency. He continued, "Imagine lifting a heavy weight for 5 hours in one day. You'd probably injure yourself. But lift a lighter weight every day for a year. Your entire body changes. The mind works exactly the same way. You don't become mentally strong because of one motivational speech. You become strong because you repeatedly keep promises to yourself." That sentence stayed with Ethan. He realized every small habit mattered. Getting out of bed when he didn't feel like it. Taking a short walk instead of giving up. Reading 10 pages instead of none. Saving a little money each month. Calling his mother every day. None of those actions looked impressive on their own. But together, they were quietly creating a completely different person. Months earlier, Ethan had been waiting for one life-changing moment. Now he understood something far more powerful. Life rarely changes all at once. It changes one decision, one habit, one ordinary day at a time. As he looked at the small wooden candle holder on his shelf that night, he smiled. It no longer represented a distant dream. It represented proof. Proof that every meaningful transformation begins long before anyone else can see it. And perhaps that's how every extraordinary life is built. Quietly, patiently. Nearly a year had passed. If someone had walked into Ethan's home, they might have thought very little had changed. The same front porch, the same family photographs, the same quiet neighborhood. But the people living inside that house were no longer the same. Sarah still experienced moments of forgetfulness, but there was a peacefulness in her that hadn't existed before. She smiled more often. She enjoyed sitting by the window with a cup of tea, watching birds land in the backyard. And Ethan, he was no longer controlled by fear. His life wasn't perfect, but it was finally moving forward. At work, his consistency began to stand out. He wasn't the loudest employee, he wasn't the smartest person in the room, but he had become dependable. When challenges appeared, he stayed calm. When others panicked, he focused on solutions. Months later, his manager called him into the office. "We've been watching your growth," she said. "You've become someone people can rely on." That afternoon, Ethan received a promotion. As he drove home, he smiled. Not because of the extra paycheck, but because he realized something. A year earlier, he would have believed this success came from luck. Now he knew better. It came from hundreds of tiny choices no one else had seen. The quiet mornings, the evening journal, the peaceful moments before sleep, the small daily habits, the decision to stop listening to the voice of fear. When he arrived home, Sarah was sitting on the porch waiting for him. He sat beside her without saying a word. After a few moments, she gently reached over and held his hand. She looked into his eyes for a long time. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "I'm proud of you." Ethan's heart nearly stopped. He didn't know whether she remembered everything, maybe she didn't. But somehow, her heart recognized what words could not explain. Tears filled his eyes. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to, because some of life's most meaningful conversations happen in silence. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, Ethan understood one final lesson. Success isn't created by one extraordinary opportunity. It's created by ordinary choices repeated with extraordinary consistency. Every peaceful evening, every courageous decision, every small promise you keep to yourself. Those moments quietly shape the person you're becoming. The future doesn't arrive overnight. It is built one decision, one habit. One day at a time, one quiet Sunday morning, Ethan woke before sunrise. The house was silent. He walked into the kitchen and prepared 2 cups of coffee. As he stepped onto the porch, Sarah was already sitting there, watching the first light spread across the sky. He handed her a cup. She smiled. "Beautiful morning," she said. "It really is," Ethan replied. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. There was no need. A year earlier, Ethan would have spent that same morning checking emails, worrying about work or thinking about everything that could go wrong. Now, he simply appreciated the moment. The warmth of the coffee, the cool morning breeze, the sound of birds welcoming a new day. He realized something extraordinary. Peace isn't something you discover at the end of success. It's something you practice while you're building it. Later that afternoon, Ethan visited the doctor one last time. "I think I finally understand," he said. The doctor smiled. "What do you understand?" Ethan looked out the window before answering. "I spent years believing my life would change after one big opportunity. I thought confidence would come first. I thought happiness would arrive after success. I was waiting for the perfect moment." He paused. But life never changes that way. It changes through small choices. The thoughts we repeat, the habits we protect, the people we make time for, the courage to take one more step, even when we don't see the whole path. The doctor nodded. "Exactly. Your future isn't created by one dramatic decision. It's shaped by the quiet decisions nobody notices." As Ethan drove home, he passed the same streets he had traveled hundreds of times before. Nothing around him had changed. Yet everything felt different. Because the greatest transformation had never happened outside. It had happened within. That evening, he walked into the living room and noticed the small wooden candle holder still resting on the shelf. Months ago, it had represented hope. Now it represented something even greater. Proof. Proof that dreams become reality when action follows belief. Proof that consistency is stronger than motivation. Proof that the stories we tell ourselves can either imprison us or set us free. Before going to bed, Ethan opened his journal one final time. He didn't write about promotions. He didn't write about money. He didn't write about goals. Instead, he wrote a single sentence. The life I wanted didn't begin when my circumstances changed. It began the day I changed the way I thought, the way I acted, and the way I lived. He closed the journal, turned off the light, and smiled. Because he finally understood a truth that many people spend their entire lives searching for. Your past may explain who you were. It does not decide who you become. Every sunrise gives you another opportunity, another choice, another beginning. So don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you feel fearless. Don't wait until life becomes easy. Take one small step today. Protect your peace. Train your mind. Honor the people you love. And remember, the future isn't something you find. It's something you create. One thought, one choice, and one day at a time. The end.